I just got home from watching Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and man, what an amazing movie that was. I would throw a certain F word in there between amazing and movie, but YouTube isn't really a big fan of that anymore, but just wow. It was great. It was one of those movies, see, maybe this is like a weird me thing, but I saw it and like wanted to be a part of the story. I wanted to be in the world. I wanted to relive the scenes, and damn, I don't say this often, but I wanted to see it again. The latest MCU movies have not been like that, at least for most people. In May of 2008, Iron Man released the start of Disney's new wave of Marvel movies. Marvel movies had, definitely been done before. I grew up with some of them, as I'm sure many of you did, but little did we know at the time of Iron Man's release the phenomena that it would create. Iron Man itself is pretty good, nothing crazy, and Disney's follow-up, The Incredible Hulk, was so mediocre that most fans and Disney themselves act like it really didn't happen. The next MCU movie, Iron Man 2, was fairly negatively received by a lot of people. So you may be wondering at this point, how the hell did this become the franchise we know today? And hell if I know, they followed Iron Man 2 up with fucking Thor. That one really fucking sucks. So I'm as perplexed as you are, but I think the answer lies in one simple word: saturation. You see, the crazy thing about these 4 movies I just mentioned, that they were released in the span of 3 years, and if you really want to, we can squeeze in the first Captain America, and guess what? That's 5 movies all in around 3 years. At the end of the day, if you can pump out a new film every year, let alone 2, does it really matter if one of them is bad or hell, even multiple? This approach to media in general is what makes a lot of modern platforms so successful. TikTok, for example, is built on the idea that, who cares if the content is good or bad, because at the end of the day, whether it's good or bad, it's really only a couple seconds anyways. If one MCU movie was bad, it really didn't matter because you could always rely on another to come along if this one really wasn't hitting the spot. Definitely more time investment, than a TikTok video, but I think you get my point. As time went on, this approach worked. Yeah, we had releases like Thor, and Thor again, and the not-so-bad Thor, and then the return of really bad Thor. But it didn't really matter, because for every shitty Thor movie that was put out, we would get a Guardians of the Galaxy, a Winter Soldier, and eventually an Infinity War. Before Marvel movies truly became a part of mainstream media, superheroes were for losers and nerds and every other 80s geek stereotype you can imagine. And thankfully, we have amazing shows like The Big Bang Theory to prop up this stereotype. Bazinga! And if they weren't for lonely virgins, they were for children, which, to be fair, could also be lonely virgins, but I say there's a bit of distinction. But for the first time in some of these people's lives, it was cool to talk about something they loved. So, of course, when their favorite superhero would finally get their own movie, people wanted to talk about it. People wanted to hypothesize. People wanted to gush about the movies, even if they weren't that great. It didn't matter because these fans finally felt like they had a home, and as the years passed, this relationship between the nerdy comic underground and the mainstream culture would build off of each other's excitement into some of the most insane and hyped movie releases we've seen in generations. When Avengers Endgame released only a few years ago in 2019, it was one of the largest movies ever. At the end of its run, it almost beat out long-standing box office champion Avatar, making around $2.7 billion in revenue. There wasn't a single person that felt like that wasn't talking about this movie, and even if there was, for every person who could give a shit about Marvel movies, there were at least like 5 to take their place. And in just 4 years, it has gone from beloved to widely criticized in the online sphere. Is it because people are just bored of superheroes? I think it might be part of the reason, but the whole reason I began to write this is because I realized that, no, people aren't. And Across the Spider-Verse was able to prove that to me. But I do believe people are a bit exhausted of Marvel as a whole. Not of Marvel characters, but just of Marvel, or maybe more specifically, Disney Marvel. Many people have voiced their opinion online about the drop in quality of some of Marvel's writing, which is fair criticism, but I think it wouldn't matter if they didn't overdo what made them successful in the first place. Saturation. Saturating a market can be a good thing. As we saw earlier on in the MCU, this approach worked well, and in my opinion did a good job of propelling the franchise into mainstream attention. But this is the same approach I believe has now hurt the brand. When you're trying to promote something, to advertise something, you want people to see it often. That's why commercials are bought in large blocks and run frequently, to get a brand in people's heads and to reach a wide variety of people. But if everyone already knows your product, this isn't nearly as practical. A bit of advertising to let people know you're still alive isn't a bad thing, but companies generally from this point on work towards retention of their already existing audience to bring in a consistent form of income. Oftentimes you see companies fail from trying too hard to break into market shares they have no business meddling with. But in Disney's case, all they really needed to do was retain the Marvel audience. To be fair to them, I believe this would have been impossible. After the ultimate event that Endgame ended up being, it seems really illogical to think that they'd be able to reach that level of anticipation again. Endgame was a culmination of years of development over a variety of movies with a variety of already beloved characters. Having that storyline come to an end was a necessary but in many ways a detrimental decision. They had to start over now. The plot that Marvel fans had been following for years was 6 feet under, along with a few of their favorite heroes people went to the movies for in the first place. To be able to keep this audience they developed, they desperately needed to release some quality films that could keep fans excited for the future of the franchise. And to be fair, Spider-Man Far From Home seemed to be a decent release to keep the momentum of the story going. It provided some closure and follow-up of the events of Endgame, and at the end of the day was a solid movie, the success Marvel needed to continue keeping their position as the top dog in the movie space. But say it together, class. Did they do this? No. Okay. To be fair, COVID got in the way of the release schedule, which is an issue that was just completely out of their control. Or was it? But even disregarding this holdup in their movie release schedule, outside of maybe shooting it on sets, I don't think this would have really affected one of their biggest failures, their TV shows. On paper, the idea of Marvel-centered television shows made sense. Television provided an opportunity to tell stories that might not fit into a single movie, or to focus on characters that wouldn't be interesting enough to fill the entire runtime of a movie. For Disney, it would also be a good incentive to get people to subscribe to their own streaming platform, and based on general reviews of these shows, things seem to be going well. But I think the problem is that these shows cross the line into oversaturation. Previously, when Marvel was pumping out releases, the most we saw was 4 movies in 1 year, that being 2017 with the release of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, and Black Panther. All 4 good movies in my opinion, but 2021 would crush this number into the fucking dirt, releasing not 8 but 9 different projects, 5 shows, and 4 movies. In 2022, Marvel would follow it up with another 9 projects, 6 shows, and 3 movies. In just 2 years, they released 3/4 the same amount of projects they'd released over the span of 11 years. Again, to Marvel's credit, COVID messed up their release schedule, but this is still absolutely insane. And following the same train of thought from the beginning of the video, this would be a good thing, right? Saturation and all that jazz. Well, no. But why was that the case? Even before Endgame would release, certain people began to voice their complaints with the Marvel franchise. With the success of Guardians of the Galaxy, some people began to notice that the following releases began to mimic the style of Guardians. Lots of short quips, lots of jokes between the characters, tense moments broken up by some random bullshit happening. It became a go-to writing style for Disney, leading to a common problem and word that some of you may notice I love to say in my videos: homogenization. The movies began to bleed into each other, with releases starting to feel less and less distinct. Certain characters felt like they'd entirely lost their character, turning instead into a quick-witted comedian rather than what they might have represented before. For a while though, this drew maybe a few critics, but generally speaking, most people didn't care. However, with the oversaturation of the Marvel franchise from 2021 and 2022, this problem would become increasingly more noticeable. And this, I largely contribute to one thing: their TV shows. Now, depending on where you look, most of the Marvel shows aren't really all that bad. Definitely some misses, but that's how it's always been. But when you combine an almost non-stop shoveling of a franchise into the mouth of consumers, an overall dip in quality, likely partially due to a lower budget, worse CGI and or a lack of care in the product, and just overall less interest in the franchise now due to almost non-existent hype, the TV shows just added fuel to the already existing negative sentiment for Marvel. And at that point, it didn't matter if some of the shows were good because the trend was over. Marvel had crossed back over the line to what they were before: uncool. Marvel movies were getting mocked left and right, stereotypes of average Marvel fans began taking their roots again, and people are just tired of the 100th superhero show or movie of the year. The superhero genre started to become as milked as the thriller genre before them. People were just tired of the formula, and at this point, they still are. But there's a reason this video has MCU fatigue in the title and not superhero fatigue or whatever, and it's because I think that most people don't hate superheroes, people hate the formulaic storytelling that comes from defining superheroes as a genre instead of a foundational piece in which to tell a story. In recent years, despite all the fatigue people have had over Marvel, and well, unfortunately most people didn't have a chance to get tired of DC because most people never really gave too many shits about DC. Anyways, but that's besides the point, because in recent years, we've had some great superhero stories. As mentioned before, the Spider-Verse series has been absolutely phenomenal so far, and has done so much to elevate the genre of animation. The Boys is a fantastically gritty show, showing the realistic side of superheroes in an over-the-top, gory, and engaging way. Invincible subverted people's expectations with its classic cartoon-style animation, bloody battles, and well-built plot twists. Superheroes aren't going anywhere. They've been around before the MCU, and I know they're going to be around after. Some of the stuff we've got out right now are some of the best superhero movies or shows we've ever seen. There's definitely, some stinkers out there, but don't forget that Thor released in 2011. So, it's been like this for a while. And I don't doubt that as long as people keep paying to see Marvel movies, some more shitty Thor movies will be released. And when that happens, you can guarantee I won't be there. I'm just hoping that for every shitty Thor movie, we might get a project filled with even half as much care, quality, and amazing storytelling that something like a Spider-Verse has to offer. Thanks for listening to me ramble, everyone, and of course, special thanks to this month's patrons. Mads, Dave the Unknown, Jimmy Chocolate Cream Boy Genius Kipjack, Griff, Einhar Anderson, Turmeric, Elliot Readings, and Maddie Grady. I'll see you all again when I have some more overtly offensive opinions to share, but until then, take care.